Hi, I'm just making this video today to talk about the importance of the story of Job, and I'm using this website, Job Pictures, which has given us their permission to publish these images, providing you supply the following acknowledgement: pictures used with permission from http theglorystory.com. So thank you very much to the Glory Story, and I'll just click onto their website. This is their website. I'm not necessarily saying that I agree with everything that they promote or publish, because I haven't actually looked through their whole website, but thank you to them for allowing us to freely share these images, which I think will which are useful to actually look at something while somebody's speaking. And the importance of Job. For a long time, as a child growing up, I used to go to Sunday school and read the Bible, and I read about the various biblical characters, and Job was one of those characters. And as a child, I sort of had a vague feeling of discomfort about the whole story. There were certain things that didn't seem to make sense. One was the idea that Satan could go to heaven to visit God and make this deal with God, like let's test Job kind of thing, which I found really disturbing, because I thought, well, how was Satan able to get into heaven? Because I thought heaven was a place that Satan was not allowed to enter. And, and that God has a conversation with him to the extent that he agrees to watch one of his devoted servants, Job, go through this horror upon horror that happens to him. His family all get killed, he loses all his cattle, dies or gets stolen, he gets covered in these boil skin pestilences, and these three friends come to talk to him, and they ask him, what have you done wrong? You must have done something wrong to offend God for all these horrible things that have happened to you. And and he declares his innocence, and he says, but I haven't done anything to offend God, and why God has punished me, I don't understand. But at no point does he condemn or curse God, except his wife, I think, does. She does condemn God, which obviously she's lost all of her children, and so and then at the end of it, he's healed. Job is healed. He obviously takes another wife. He has 7 more children, and 7 more sons and 3 more daughters, even more beautiful than the daughters before, and everything's fine, and everybody's really happy. And God admonishes Job's friends for speaking ill of him, and then the friends, ask Job for his forgiveness, and everybody's very happy. And it is almost like a fairy tale in a way, which most fairy tales do have their horrible bits in as well. And at first glance, it seems like, well, it tells us something. So to the child listening to the story is telling basically that even if you're very, very good, Satan can actually still have the power to cause you a lot of problems. But if you keep your faith and you don't blame God for those things, you just accept it's something bad that's happening by bad energies, eventually you will get better, things will get better, and, you know, all your fortunes will actually be restored, and you will have passed a test, you will have survived a test, and people who were accusing you and suggesting bad things about you because you were going through bad experiences, even though they helped you, you know, they will be admonished, and they'll say, oh, yeah, we are sorry, you know, that we thought that you had done something wrong, or there was something bad in you. And and so that's one interpretation, and that's like a basic interpretation, isn't it, that you would take just from looking at the pictures. It is a picture, a story picture interpretation. So the reason why the story of Job is so important is because it shows us things. It shows us how people thought, and the kind of things that people did in our history, in our civilized history. And so first of all, we realise that somebody who prays a lot and worships God, and who's very happy, has a lot of land and cattle and lots of sons and daughters, is considered favoured by God. And that person obviously feels this too, and so he praises God every day because he's got such a wonderful life, and he's very, very happy, and he's thanking God every day for this wonderful abundance in life that God has given to him. Now, Satan, where does he fit in? Because, you know, God has banished Satan. So are we to believe that Satan suddenly manages to get an audience with God and do this little deal with God? Or is this an inclusion? Is the Satan bit an inclusion? Written much later than this actual story was written, or lived as an experience. Because we must remember that between these lived experiences and the actual them getting written down into text, there's often hundreds of years of a gap. Even thousands of years maybe, we just don't know. So let's remove Satan from the picture, and let's just look at the story without Satan included. So we've got a man, he's very happy, got lots of lands, lots of sons, beautiful daughters. Every day he's thanking God for blessing him in life. And then terrible things befall this man. Tragedy upon tragedy. He loses everything that he's got, his family, and even his health. And because of this, people around him are saying he's cursed, or he's done something wrong, he's a bad person, he needs to ask God to forgive him. And but he says he holds on to his innocence. He says, no, I have done nothing wrong, God isn't punishing me, you know, this is something else, it's bad forces that have happened to me, and I'm a victim of those things. And he stands by his innocence, he says, and he stands by God. He said, no, God hasn't done these things to me, they're just things that have happened to me from bad people and bad things that have happened to me, and they're not from God, they're not because I'm bad, and I'm going to keep my faith, I'm going to stay strong, I'm going to survive, and he survives, and he comes through, and he finds another wife, he has more children, and he gets his lands restored, and his flocks, and his friends apologise, saying, yeah, we were wrong to suggest that God was punishing you. And God admonishes them for saying that. And then everybody's happy. They asked Job to forgive them, and Job obviously forgives them, and everybody is happy. And even through his problems, even though his friends were suggesting that he'd done something wrong, his friends were nonetheless trying to help him, because they believed that if he just accepted that he must have done something bad in order for because these bad things happened to him, then he must, then things will get better, you see. So they were thinking they were helping him. They weren't there to be nasty to him. And by their genuine belief of what they understood. So if we now think about the story is telling us something else entirely. It's telling us of social attitudes of our ancestors, our human ancestors. It is telling us that people commonly believed that people who had plenty were blessed by God, and that people who were ill, disabled, who suffered crimes and injuries, that they were cursed by God, and that somehow people who suffered these persecutions that life can deliver sometimes, that somehow they are responsible for their own suffering. So Job is held to be responsible for his illness, for the loss of his lands, for his poverty, for his despair. And he still, but as a human being, he knows in his heart, even though that's what all his people believe, that's what all his friends believe, who've come to tell him that, look, you must accept it, there's something wrong in you, you have done something wrong, and you must accept this, because otherwise you're never going to get better, and things are always going to be really bad for you, because you've obviously offended God, and God is now punishing you. And they thoroughly, strongly believed that. And they strongly, thoroughly believed that it was the only way to help their friend was to get him to acknowledge this and accept it. And then make the necessary remedies, you see. And as I say, it shows the strength of Job, that he was able to stand up to what he knew in his heart, that he held on to what he knew in his heart and in his mind, that he had not offended God, he hadn't harmed anybody, he had done nothing wrong, and yet these bad things still happened to him. And he lived in the hope that, life would get better and abundance would be his lot in life once again. And it was his hope and his inner strength, his inner faith in himself and in God, because he knew that God wouldn't punish him, because he knew God had done nothing wrong, that he had done nothing wrong. And then God admonishes Job's friends for speaking wrongly about God, because what you have said about me is not right. So what does that mean? What did they say about God? So therefore the story is telling us that God is saying, I don't punish people. People don't suffer because I'm punishing them. People don't suffer because they've done something bad. All those things we can interpret from God's response to Job's friends. And they ask Job to forgive them because they believed wrong things about him. They judged him in his time of struggle. They judged him. They used all the circumstances, his own suffering, as a reason to judge ill of him and as evidence that God was punishing him. And that is what the story of Job is explaining to us. And that's why it's such an important story, and why Jesus mentions it as well, is because the story of Job is showing us a fact of life, that bad things can happen to good people, and good people can be very, very poor and suffer terrible things in life, and it does not mean that God is punishing them or that they have done anything wrong. It does not mean that Satan has done a deal with God to test you, because God likes testing people. The reality is that life tests us all in many, many different ways, and some have a better time of it than others. And that's why when people are suffering and struggling, it's our ethical and compassionate duty to help people and to support them through their struggles and their suffering, and to help them find a brighter day, and not to use their circumstances and suffering as a reason to judge them or to in any way diminish their value as a human being and their dignity, and is to always uphold a person's dignity. And you know, this story really did help me a lot, which I mentioned about in my other video, when I felt persecuted by judgments that had been issued against woman as a being, as it were. And as I say, most of those, well, all of those judgments were derived from abuse that I had suffered, crimes against myself I'd suffered until the age of 17. And that is exactly what was basically said to me, is that, you know, bad things happened to me because I was a bad person. God hated me. He hated me from the moment I was born and had punished me all my life, and actually I belonged to the devil. You know, I'd failed all the tests, as it were, and I belonged to the devil, and you know, that was it. And as I say, when I found, although I felt I was like Job, because in my heart I knew that I was innocent, and I had no control, I had no choice. And so how could I be found guilty of things that were lies or I had no control or choice in? And I was in fact suffering crimes against me. So it's like I'm being found guilty of the crimes that were issued against me as a child. So the child is guilty, and the abusive adult is an instrument of God punishing the guilty child. That is what I was being asked to accept. And as I say, you know, I felt so upset and wounded by those judgments, which I felt I had no actual solid argument. I had my own understanding like Job, but You know, I'm not Job, you know. I mean, I didn't been praying to God every single day, and, you know, could I apply his circumstance exactly to mine? You know, his father didn't abuse him. He didn't suffer child abuse for 17 years. And so for me, I felt to actually just blindly accept this story as absolute foundation for supporting my innocence in truth was a bit like wishful thinking. And I couldn't move forward into the future based on wishful thinking, you know. Up until that point, I'd lived most of my life just trying to survive, trying to stay sane and survive. And I certainly did not feel that I wanted to move on into the world based on wishful thinking if the alternative was that I was the most evil person in the world and was just going to cause loads of problems and troubles for lots of people, you know, which obviously when it came right down to it, I thought the risk to all the people is actually too great, and even if I am innocent, it's too great to take that risk. And that's why I decided to end my life. And as I say, it was only the dream of Prophet Muhammad that saved me, that persuaded me, that convinced me that, you know, you're not a bad person, you're not evil, and don't end your life. I accept you. And so, you know, and I do feel this is an important story for today, because there are a lot of people today who are suffering injury, who have lived unhappy lives, and they've committed crimes or they've done wrong things. They've lived against their heart and their intelligence, and they know that they have, and they feel guilty about it, and they try to forget it, they try to make excuses, they try to blame other people, or they blame themselves for things that other people have done to them. And they do believe that they're cursed or that God's punishing them. And, you know, I really, really just would like to assure people that this is not true. You know, God is not the universe, the intelligent universe that created us and life and everything, loves everybody, and the intelligent universe exactly understands what's going on today and the kind of situations and circumstances that people are in, and how they're compromised, both rich and poor, and how people do all kinds of things that sanely they would not do, but because the insanities of the world are so normalised, they just do things with as if it's a very little thing without even thinking, sign a piece of paper, and then the next minute a whole area of land is devastated. And people are unleashing the kinds of powers that have massive devastation at the stroke of a pen. You know, and hardly, barely even thinking about it. And then suddenly they do start thinking about it, or somebody forces them to think about it. And then they want to hide, and they want to lie, and they want to kill, and they want to destroy evidence, and they want to avoid the crimes, and blah, blah, blah. It just goes on and on and on. And that's why, you know, we do have to reach a point of amnesty and forgiveness. So to allow people to step out of these roles that they've been forced into in this world that has included the devil to sit alongside God. You know, the devil has access into God, into heaven, you know, but that isn't allowed. The devil is not allowed in heaven. That's why it's heaven, because God does not entertain devils. God understands what a devil is. A person who's got serious mental health problems, issues, psychopaths. Though I must say, not all psychopaths have got are bad people, you know. It is a psychology that can serve very, very useful functions in the world. But when it's twisted with lies and all the imbalances, they're very, very dangerous for the what we call now low empathic mindset. An imbalanced world will turn these people evil. They will be evil. They will be ruthless, merciless, because they have a low level of compassion. And in order to keep this consciousness balanced, always we need to be more on the side of compassion, and to build a compassionate world. And then any person with mental illnesses immediately stand out like a sore thumb. Somebody's stolen something. Why have they so? Nobody needs to steal anything, so why somebody stole something? Somebody's killed somebody. Why has somebody killed somebody? Is it a moment of madness? Were they jealous? What? So they've got a serious problem then. They get jealous and they kill. They can't handle their emotions. They need to be in a secure unit, so they get therapy to learn how to handle their emotions. You know, it's that kind of thing. This punishment thing, it serves no purpose whatsoever. It's a satisfaction of anger. And anger's just a fire, you know. It just wants more and more and more. It never really ends. We've all got a right to feel anger. We've got a right to express anger when horrible things happen. And then we have a right to calm down and to think rationally and to behave humanely. That's the way to deal with anger. It's not to say, no, you're not allowed to get angry. You're not allowed to express any anger. It means, no, people are allowed to get angry, express anger, but they're not allowed to go around damaging and killing each other on the strength of it. It means that they get angry and then they calm down. They talk to people, they get help, friends talk, and then they come at a rational solution of how to address the problem that has made them angry, you see. And so, this, again, it cuts out the extremes. The extremes are going from one extreme to the other, of cutting out all emotion, or else, just saying, yeah, let's just, run with our emotions. So, this idea of a God that works with the devil in order to test his servant. Again, it's putting in this inclusion is damaging, because it's encouraging people to believe that somehow the devil is serving God. You see, that somehow that's how it's meant to be. We're meant to, there's meant to be the devils out there because, God's testing us all. And that very common interpretation of this story, that the whole story is about God testing Job, testing Job's faith, is a misinterpretation of the story. Really. Because really what the true interpretation of the story, what the true story is about, is how God is saying that I don't punish people and cause them problems. And if people suffer problems and misfortune in life, it isn't because I'm punishing them, and please don't judge those people. Please help them, you see. And Job was tested in his sanity. in the sense that he held on to his sanity and the truth that he was entirely innocent and he was being persecuted. So we can only thank the people of history that they treasured this story, and yes, they did add their little bits into it as well, which we know is what happens through time. Little bits get added, bits get taken out, things get changed. But we do have to thank the people that saved this story for us, the Judaic peoples, and who treasured these stories, because, they are a treasure of information and understanding and real human experience, and they're a guide. And as I say, after I'd had my dream about Prophet Muhammad, this story it was like further guidance that yes, this story is exactly true. And I think it's of particular importance probably to the people of India, which is a country that lives by a caste system where people are judged cursed of God or, guilty in some way because they're born poor. And, I think that the Hindu people could learn something from this story and liberate themselves from this caste system, because it's as if that their consciousness, the consciousness that's working within their faith, is antiquated, really, because it's based on a belief that's proven false by this story and by so many people's lived experiences, where we know entirely innocent people suffer terrible losses and tragedies in life, and some people are persecuted, and that maybe the Hindu faith needs to accept this now, as I believe Krishna long accepted, and move away from the antiquated caste system, which is only a part of Hinduism. It isn't Hinduism. It's an interpretation of the truth of Hinduism, which is, the the magnificent universe. And we, I think we need to understand that somehow that consciousness, that intelligence is speaking to us, and instinctively humanity's recognised that, and that's why this ancient story has survived and been treasured as a holy story. It's holy because it's important. It's a sacred story. Why? Because it's a sacred lesson for life. It's teaching us a sacred lesson, and it's teaching us about how to discern wheat from chaff. It's teaching us how to think, and how to recognise discrepancies, and how to recognise the importance of what is said to these three people by the spirit called God. They're called God, the intelligence, the universal intelligence. What you have said of me is not right. It isn't right. And so yes, we do have to realise that God is not punishing people. God is not testing people. Life is testing people. Life punishes people. That's just the way life is, and that's why we live by laws and we have such compassion and care and consideration for each other, because we know life is difficult and it isn't fair all the time, and our law, our universal law of abundance and compassion, is there to compensate for the unfairness and inequalities of life, you see, because we're human beings and we have that right to give ourselves the right to compensate ourselves for the tribulations and trials that life throws at us. And we have that right to make the best of every situation and to survive and heal from bad situations, and not to be judged and persecuted because we are suffering. So anyway, I hope you agree with my interpretation of Job and the reasons why it's an important story for all humanity, and that if you have suffered in life or have had any bad experiences and you feel that these are in some way a punishment, sometimes one wrong action leads to another wrong action, or we can get bad experiences when we know we're doing something wrong. We go against our better judgment, and as I say, we take responsibility for that. But the bad things that happen aren't a punishment from God. It's just things that happen. It's what happens. One bad thing can lead to another bad thing, whether it's through your own doing or through somebody else's doing. A man who's lost his sons isn't going to be so vigilant looking out for his cattle, and then they're gone, and these are the kind of things that happen, whether it's through your own fault or through somebody else's fault. And I think, the story's encouraging people to pick ourselves up, and to say, take any responsibility if we think we have in some way, and learn from that, make amends for it, or if we haven't, acknowledge, we've got an enemy somewhere, or there's somebody we need to warn other people about, and not be burdened with guilt and all these things, because the guilt just doesn't help. We have to take responsibility and say, I was stupid, I did that wrong, or somebody did that to me and now I'm suffering because of it, and this is how I'm suffering. Acknowledge it, because that's part of the crime, and we can't ignore. And when we see people suffering as a result of crimes, the last thing they need is judgments and condemnations and suspicion. We need to take the sufferer at face value, accept their suffering and help them through their suffering, whether it was their fault or it wasn't their fault. If somehow they're suffering through their own fault, then yes, the only way is, as Job's friends were saying, yes, well, you need to recognise your fault in order to end your suffering in life. And if you have no fault, then we have to find out who are these people that have done this to you. Or we have to just acknowledge that life has dealt you a heavy blow and now you need help, and we're going to help you. Do you see what I mean? At no point is there any desire to see a victim and unload some negative energy on that person, which is what is happening. People are pouring out negative energies on on the victims, on the victim survivors. The poor are being blamed for their poverty. And we have to end it. And as I say, it is a global issue. It's a global issue. This caste system that, because capitalism's got a caste system really identical to that of India. There's no two ways about it. Except our caste system, it is money, isn't it? But it's more or less the same in India by now. It is money. The richest people are considered to be the higher castes. And so, it is about money, and it's the same in Britain, in all over the world. The richest people are the highest people. And it isn't true. It isn't true. And so we have to bring balance now. And we need the richest people to help the poorest people, because the most intelligent people are amongst those poorest people as well. And we're throwing away, we're discarding really so much humanity that's so important to us in favour of these rich people who don't really know very much, a lot of them. I'm not saying all of them don't, because I know there's some very intelligent rich people, I mean, I don't judge people according to their wealth as individuals anyway, but generally speaking, our true wealth is in the wealth of humanity and what we can achieve with that wealth of humanity, and why it's so important we don't just throw it all away as this criminal cabal wants to do. And they've already destroyed so much of the planet, and we really need to stop them. And they are not a punishment from God. They're not working for God, and God is not ruling the world. As we can see, if Satan decides, the insanity decides that it's going to steal off people and kill, then that's what, because somehow that gives it more power, then that's what they're going to do, and that is what they are doing, and they have been doing it for a long time. Satan is ruling the world. If we want God, universal intelligence, to rule the world, then the only way that's going to happen is if we decide to support universal intelligence and support universal law of abundance and compassion. That's the only way. We can't defeat this consciousness with bombs and guns. It's never going to happen. We can't defeat it with riots and going crazy. We have to forget about defeating it, because it has actually in reality defeated itself with its own judgments, and its own persecutions are now all applicable absolutely to itself, and it has condemned itself. And by standing by universal law, we stand by that condemnation too. And that's why it's so against universal law, because universal law stops all the kind of freedoms of the devil that wants to go around stealing people's lands, livestock, and killing their families. You see. So that's what universal law is created to prohibit, simply by severely limiting any chance of that consciousness, any aspect of that consciousness that supports that consciousness being permitted to operate in human society. So it is about us standing up for our rights, standing up for our rights to live intelligently, according to intelligent laws, And universal law is an intelligent law, and it was designed by intelligence, the intelligence that actually created us. So there's no escaping from it. If we don't live by that intelligence, we will be ruled by Satan forever. And because Satan's totally crazy, you know, you're never going to have any sort of utopia, really. You know, you're never going to reach any level of harmony between humanity and life, which is what we all want to live in harmony with nature. We know we're not. It grinds against us all on a daily basis without us even realising it, most of all. Some of us are conscious of it, that it grates against us to waste, the imbalances, the stupidities of the world, the red tape, the endless ridiculousness of things that tells us black is white and white is black. You know, we do need to accept that there's a higher way. There is a higher way, and we are meant to live that higher way. The higher way is not a figment of somebody's imagination. It's a reality. It's a real possibility. It's every bit as real as the plans for building a skyscraper are real. The skyscraper doesn't yet exist, but the plans are there, and it will exist if people want it to. And it's the same with universal law. If people want it to exist, if people want to live by it, people will. And, you know, I have explained about universal law in my previous videos, but basically we're talking about human rights and children's rights, and putting the child first. And that's why any change, you know, we don't want violence and aggression. Isn't going to change anything, and it does put children at risk. And that's why, you know, I think, yes, we feel angry, we feel enraged, we can express our anger and rage at the politicians and the people that are doing bad things, but at the end of the day, calmly and collectively, we need to address the problem with lawful actions, and in a child-friendly way, a way that isn't going to leave children vulnerable and at risk, a way that's going to make sure people in hospitals are still cared for. You see, we need to behave in a lawful way, and we need to accept that God has not given the devil the right to rule over our planet because we're all evil people, and punish us because we're all such evil people. That is not true. We are being persecuted. Most people are genuinely innocent. Any crimes that they're committing is because they are forced to. They have no choice. They're like slaves. They're consciousness slaves. And now we need to get strong and break out of these consciousnesses. Stand against the wrongdoings within ourselves. Say, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be part of this. Speak out against it and stand up. Stand up for your rights to live like a human being and to live by a fair and just law, and for people who've committed serious crimes to be investigated and convicted and incarcerated, because obviously they've got, you know, somebody, a banker that's robbed how many people, caused so much suffering and damage. That person must have serious mental health issues. Where are they living to be able to do that and not even bother about it? Obviously that person needs prolonged therapy. for them to reconnect with themselves. And you have to feel sorry for those people, because when they do reconnect with themselves, they are going to be just devastated. You see, and that's why criminals never want to have to connect with what they've done, and they hope to be able to live high, and then they die, but hey, it was a good innings. They had the best that life had to offer. But they don't realise. They don't realise that guilt. Well, I suppose the further away a soul is living away from the truth in life and the reality of life, as far as they're consciously aware, then I suppose the less of their soul actually survives to be born again, you know. But unfortunately they've left their dead thoughts behind, and all the influences of their dead thoughts, and the buildings that their dead thoughts created, and blah blah blah. You know, unfortunately their negativity carries on like a ghost in the world, you know. Except it's not a ghost when it's people's thoughts. So, you know, in that sense, the ruling consciousness isn't actually alive. It is dead. It's dead. You know, that is the fact of it. And we have to accept that the ruling consciousness is dead. It died a very long time ago. It did actually die, probably in 1914, after around World War One. You know, finally, because of the lies, and that we just realised, you know, it was just lies. So, and basically that was what people understood by the end of World War One, was that no, poor people aren't poor because they're evil. They're poor because they're being robbed by criminals. And what, are we supposed to assume these criminals are working for God in order to test us all? Well, they're not. They're not. And so anyway, thank you for listening, and I hope it helps. Thank you.